plenty of Americans that need help here first. Not against having a big door and an open legal immigration system, but it's got to be legal. Certain things. Anyway, so the president also is saying repeatedly that, hey, listen, if I have to, I'll have the military build it. Now, it's going to be interesting as we watch that, to watch Democrats arguing. They're going to claim the military has no business protecting America from thousands of illegal immigrants that are invading our borders. Democrat Bernie Thompson, the upcoming Homeland Security chairman, said using the military to build the wall just doesn't make any sense. I can think of a lot more important things we could do with the military than build a fence. We're not building a fence, we're building a wall. Now, on the other hand, you got key Republicans, Republican chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Appropriations Committees, both saying today that they would consider the president's newest suggestion that, in fact, the Pentagon build the southern border wall. And if that's what it comes down to, Richard Shelby, Senate Appropriations Committee chair, who would oversee Pentagon spending on a border wall, said the president's got a lot of leeway on all of this because under the Constitution, he has the right and the duty to defend the nation and protect the borders and everything that goes with it. Jim Inhofe, Senate Armed Services Committee, said he spoke with the president last week about his bill that raises what he says is enough revenue to pay for the wall. Now, directing the military to build the wall, possibly out of military construction funds, could also be an option if the push by Inhofe and other defense appropriators, works. For a $750 billion defense budget plan that is coming next year, that's a big amount of money. And certainly we have other areas that need fixing. But this is priority number one. This is going to be fun to watch, I'll tell you that. We'll get back to this later in the program today. You know what's amazing? Something to watch. There are hundreds of congressmen that paid apparently millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded hush money to those that are claiming some type of sexual harassment or worse. With all the talk, I wonder how many of these are Democrats. Now, the problem is, everyone's making arguments that somehow a non-disclosure agreement that the president might have gone into with somebody 12 years ago, and these agreements are far more common than you ever think. People say, all right, well, it's worth this much if I litigate it, and I got whatever. I don't need the headache. We'll come to a deal, whatever happens. So sometimes it's done for those reasons, sometimes for legitimate reasons. And it's hard to know the difference. But that's an individual making an agreement on their own using their own money. Very different if you work for the government. For example, if the House wants to really push this issue of a campaign finance violation, I said, well, let them push it as hard as they want to push it. Because if you go back to November 2017, it was the New York Post that broke the story, telling the story of Representative Jackie Speier, that millions of dollars had been doled out to alleged victims of harassment from congressional members over the past decade. Many of these members still working there. And she testified that current members of Congress who are known sex harassers and that $15 million in taxpayer hush money has been made to accusers. So as you hear the sanctimony over, well, we couldn't get them on Russia, there's no Russian collusion at all, and their hopes and dreams of what they would get out of Mueller's filings last Friday didn't come to fruition, then they all settled on well, we think he broke a campaign finance law. And I'm watching this unfold here. Well, if that's the case, then I think we have a pretty strong case about campaign finance violations as it relates to, maybe Hillary Clinton. And that case was made in a piece by Mark Penn, because the Steele dossier was at least partially paid for by the DNC committee law firm. Remember, they funneled money, the Clinton campaign, and Donna Brazile claimed that Hillary was in charge of the DNC money. Remember how Mark Penn points out in the Hill today that Hillary's payments to Christopher Steele were first funneled through her campaign lawyer and laundered. Remember, it was sent to Perkins Coie. Apparently, not even, James Comey didn't know who Perkins Coie was. And I don't believe that either. As he was saying, I don't remember 250 times. But then laundered through Fusion GPS to hire a foreign national to come up with the phony Russian lies that they used to influence the American people consciously in the election of 2016. How Robert Mueller and the Pitbull Andrew Weissman and company and Jeannie Ray are not focused on that is a miracle. The Steele dossier was paid in part by the Democratic National Committee. They used a cutout on the FEC forms by saying it was a legal expense. It's settled law, as Mark Penn points out, that the ultimate recipient, not some intermediary, must be disclosed in cases along with the proper use category. So it was not a legal cutout. Yet the complaint against the DNC and Hillary's campaign is, slowly working its way through the FEC and the law firm. They've not been raided by prosecutors. We don't see anyone pleading guilty to felonies here. Mueller's prosecutors are looking the other way on Uranium One, and that's, giving Putin 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material for nuclear weapons. We had a spy in there telling Robert Mueller himself about bribery, extortion, money laundering, and kickbacks. And Mueller's prosecutors look the other way on, a campaign finance violation? You don't think this is going to come up for Hillary? And that they're going to get away with this? There was a great post today by the great one, Mark Levin, on his Facebook page. Some stuff we already know. The sitting president can't be indicted. That's official DOJ policy since '73. Neither the special counsel nor the SDNY, Southern District of New York, or the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein can defy a 45-year-old policy. So it's not an issue for the president. He points out also that, the Southern District of New York, they're not experts in campaign finance violations. And neither is the Clinton-appointed district judge. They rarely handle these cases. Now, they're known for doing great work in the Southern District of New York, especially on terrorism cases and the Blind Shake case and so many others. And a lot of great lawyers, Andy McCarthy, Rudy Giuliani, John Sale, who's going to join us later. They've all come out of there. But the media and others intentionally refuse to actually look at what the real rules and context are. And they would have you, once they didn't get anything Russia out of the Friday filings, this is what they ran to, regurgitating what prosecutors have merely filed in their own self-serving briefs. Now, he points out that the actual campaign rules and context do not include non-disclosure agreements or infinite other contracts or payments or arrangements, acts of a private nature, as campaign contributions. In other words, especially 12 years ago. This is normal human behavior. People have a right to enter into agreements for whatever reasons they choose to do it. Private payments can be made in any manner, any amount. And again, they're private payments involving private parties. So there's no reporting requirement because they're not campaign payments made with or without campaign funds. On top of the fact that the president can donate as much as he wants to his campaign, even if it was, but it's not. And the Southern District's inclusion in these charges in the Cohn plea deal is kind of a PR attack against the president by an office coordinating with Mueller, obviously aligned with Comey, and they knew that Cohn would plead, but why did they believe that version of what Michael Cohn said when he said had a very different version when he said he did it on his own with his own money early on and was paid back? So I don't think that this would work in any court anyway, but, as Mark points out here, they knew the left-wing media politicians would use that to just pivot away from Russia. That was all part of the strategy. By the way, no due process, no presumption of innocence. They knew they couldn't charge a sitting president. That's never been brought up either. Thus, they convict the president, scream impeachment as loud and as often as they can, and it really has no chance of going anywhere. And it's all for political purposes. By the way, when have you ever seen judges or people release materials that are redacted the way we saw? That's another question. And as for impeachment, Mark points out the NDAs involving wholly private matters occurring before the president was even a candidate, unrelated to his office, cannot legitimately trigger the Constitution's impeachment clause. In other words, they could not be more irrelevant. And the history of the clause and its high crimes and misdemeanor language make it clear that the office of the president's duties are not affected in any conceivable way by earlier private contacts. Now, Gerald Nadler and Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff can say whatever they want. Doesn't matter what they say. Mark writes in his piece, he's more than thrilled to be an executioner in this French Revolution redux. The Constitution be damned. Meanwhile, he and others wave around the Constitution as if they're defending it against the tyrant, when in fact it's them who know not its meaning in any way. All right, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. Jim Jordan will talk about all these things when we get back. A lot to get to today. Busy news day. Wow. Listen.